Today's episode of The History Guy is brought to you by Babbel. The Bermuda Triangle, which is roughly defined as the 3 points of Bermuda, Miami, and Puerto Rico, where numerous ships and planes have gone missing over a number of years, is one of the most captivating mysteries of the modern era. Official agencies will tell you that there's nothing supernatural going on, that the disappearance of these ships and planes can be explained with mundane reasons, such as mechanical failure or weather, but the sheer number of ships and planes that have disappeared had led to numerous theories. And while some of the most famous of these disappearances, for example, the disappearance of USS Cyclops in 1918, occurred towards the beginning of the 20th century, it might surprise you to know that it wasn't until mid-century, in 1950, that the first mainstream news articles started to put these disappearances together in what might be seen as the beginning of the Bermuda Triangle myth. And that was 5 years after the disappearance of Flight 19. In fact, it was the disappearance of two much less known planes of the British South American Airways, that really solidified the Bermuda Triangle myth. The mysterious disappearance of the Star Tiger and the Star Ariel deserve to be remembered. Thank you, Babbel, for sponsoring this episode of The History Guy. You know, the story of British South American Airways is a good reminder that history occurs all over the world and doesn't always occur necessarily where people speak English. Both for my research and for my travels, it would be much easier for me if I could speak another language or two, but as anyone who's ever tried to correct my pronunciation of foreign words might guess, languages don't come easy to me.
No bebo café.
No bebo café. And then came Babbel, the world's first foreign language app. Esa es la historia que merece ser recordada.
¿Bebemos algo?
Bebemos algo? The practice is fun and easy, and the reviews help make sure that you retain the information, because, you know, todo lo bueno historia involucran piratas. Whether you want to learn a new language for travel or for work or to talk to relatives or just for self-improvement, Babbel can have you up and start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks. It's easy, it's fun, it doesn't take a lot of your time, and it's got a 20-day money-back guarantee. Mi hermano el chico de historia. ¿Dónde esto la baña? What language would you like to learn? Let me know in the comments, and click the link in the description to save up to 60% off today. At the end of the Second World War, the British government was trying to re-establish its trade connections. Integral to that was the development of the relatively new idea of airways, as well as shipping routes. Aviation writer Sumit Singh wrote in a 2021 edition of Simple Flying that, as the Second World War came to an end, the new government was keen on having 3 state airlines to cover the UK's air services. In 1939, 2 of the earliest British airlines, Imperial Airways and British Airways Limited, merged to form the British Overseas Airways Corporation, or BOAC, the UK's first state airline. During the war, BOAC maintained the tenuous air routes to the British colonies, flying often circuitous routes to avoid war dangers. But during the war, civilian air travel between the United Kingdom and European countries was largely impossible because of the conflict. In 1946, when restrictions were relaxed, BOAC created a new division to take over European routes, British European Airways. In 1946, BEA received a Crown Charter to operate as an airway of their own. Thus, Singh explains the new post-war plan. British Overseas Airways Corporation was to maintain operations across North America, the British Empire, and the Far East. Meanwhile, British European Airways was requested to handle European and domestic services, but that left service to and from South America and the Caribbean. Here, instead of a legacy airline, the government looked to British Latin American Airlines, a line that had been created in 1944, mostly to support steamship operations in South America. The airline primarily recruited former RAF pilots, particularly from Pathfinder units, which airline president Don Bennett had commanded during the war. In 1945, the airline was renamed British South American Airways, and in 1946, BSAA became a government-controlled airline, responsible for South American and Caribbean air routes. While production was shifting, there was a shortage of civilian aircraft, and all 3 airlines made use of war designs. BSAA, in fact, used modified RAF aircraft, the 4-engine heavy bomber Avro Lancaster, modified as the Avro Lancastrian, a passenger and mail aircraft that had the armor and weapons removed. The Lancastrian, however, was less than ideal, as it had relatively little room for passengers. The airline soon acquired 4 Avro Tudor IV aircraft, which was a grandson of the Lancastrian, developed from the Lincoln bomber, which was itself a derivative of the Lancaster. The Tudor IV could carry a more respectable 32 passengers, as well as a crew of 5, and was the first pressurized civilian passenger aircraft in British use. The UK Ministry of Civil Aviation described the Tudor IV as an all-metal monoplane designed and manufactured by A.V. Rowe and Company Limited of Manchester for service as a passenger-carrying airline. It is propelled by 4 liquid-cooled reciprocating engines designed by Rolls-Royce Limited of Derby. And the plane had a span of 120 feet, with a fuselage length of 85 foot 3 inches. In 1947, BSAA acquired an Avro Tudor with the designation G-AHNP, one of the first 3 to be built, which flew its initial test flight on November 4th. BSAA named the aircraft the Star Tiger. After delivery to BSAA, the Ministry of Civil Aviation noted that the aircraft was thereafter consistently employed on the route from London to the West Indies. The route flew from London to Havana, with stops in Lisbon, the Azores, and Bermuda. At 3:34 in the afternoon on Thursday, January 29th, 1948, the Star Tiger was leaving Santa Maria Airport in the Azores, headed to Bermuda on the second leg of the journey from London to Havana. On board was a crew of 6, including 2 stewardesses that the airline called Star Girls, and 25 passengers. Among the passengers was Air Marshal Sir Arthur Cunningham, a senior RAF leader and hero of the war. The plane was less than 3 months old. It had made the return route from Havana to London 11 times without incident and had flown a total of 575 hours. The Civil Aviation Ministry reported that the plane had a valid certificate of airworthiness. Air Registration Board requirements demanded a comprehensive routine examination before it completed 600 hours of flying. The ministry writes that the Star Tiger, having completed 575 hours of flying, was accordingly subjected to such a comprehensive maintenance check, which was carried out by the British South American Airways Corporation in January. During the check, certain minor defects were discovered and remedied. This check occurred immediately before the January 29th flight. However, there was a problem with the onboard heating, which the company had previously reported as being unreliable. The problem was remedied during the overnight stop in Lisbon, with parts replaced, but the problem reoccurred on the flight to Santa Maria. The problem, the ministry said, caused much discomfort to the passengers. There was, however, another problem as the plane prepared to depart from Lisbon, as the port inboard engine failed to start, something that required the replacement of a priming pump. The repairs delayed the takeoff by approximately 2.5 hours. A further delay came at Santa Maria, where an adverse weather report of strong headwinds compelled the crew to stay the night, delaying the trip until the next day. The crew included a commander, Captain B.W. McMillan, a first officer, Captain D. Coldy, a second officer, C. Ellison, and radio officer R. Tuck, in addition to the 2 Star Girls, V. Clayton and H. Nichols. The ministry reported that there could be no question that they formed an able and experienced team. Thus, when it took off from Santa Maria Airport, the plane was, by all accounts, in good repair, and the crew were able and experienced, flying a normal route that the Star Tiger had completed 11 times previously. The flight from the Azores to Bermuda is nearly 2,000 miles. It was among the longest open-ocean routes flown by an airline in 1948. The expected flight time from the Azores to Bermuda was 12 hours and 26 minutes. The ministry noted that with all passengers and the fuel load, the plane was slightly over the 80,000-pound limit of its certificate. Notably, a BSAA Lancastrian was flying the same route that day, just 1 hour ahead of the Star Tiger. The Lancastrian landed at Kindly Field in Bermuda on time and without incident. The Star Tiger, the ministry writes, was never seen again. Kindly Field in Bermuda was operated by the United States Army Air Force. As soon as the Star Tiger was overdue, energetic steps were taken. The search included eventually 25 aircraft, and all areas of the sea where it was conceivable that Star Tiger may have come down were scanned. Some flotsam, floating boxes in an oil drum were seen, but could not be positively connected to the Star Tiger. And as to what happened, the report notes that Star Tiger made regular radio contacts over the course of the flight, first with the Azores and then with Bermuda, although sometimes the ministry notes at intervals greater than the 30 minutes that's recommended. The last radio communication came at 3:15 a.m., There's nothing out of the ordinary in the plane's radio communication. No distress messages of any kind were heard by the BSAA controller in Bermuda or at any other station, with the report noting that many operators would have been listening to the relevant wavelengths within the normal range of the Star Tiger's transmitters. And the ministry's investigation found that the weather was stable. There were no atmospheric disturbances of a serious kind, which might cause structural danger to the aircraft, and there were no electrical storms. The flight's sudden disappearance, without a distress call, and the lack of wreckage were baffling. An extensive report by the Minister of Civil Aviation was commissioned. The report, released a year after the disappearance, concluded, "The direct evidence which is available in the case is so indefinite that no conclusion can be reached as to what occurred. Yet some misfortune overtook this aeroplane. It may truly be said that no more baffling problem has ever been presented for investigation. What happened in this case will never be known, and the fate of the Star Tiger must remain an unsolved mystery." During the investigation, all Tudor IV aircraft were briefly grounded, but were returned to flight status as no major defects in the design could be identified. A 1950 article by E.V.W. Jones of the Associated Press entitled "Air-Sea Mysteries Show It Is Still a Big World," considered to be the first real speculation about what would come to be called the Bermuda Triangle, mentioned the loss of the Sea Tiger. But by then, the Sea Tiger was not alone. In November of 1948, BSAA took possession of two Avro Tudor Model 4B aircraft. The 4B differed from the Model 4 with the addition of another crew spot for a flight engineer, which reduced the passenger capacity to 28. The 4B, with the registration number G-AGRE, was named the Star Ariel. On January 17, 1949, almost exactly a year after the disappearance of Star Tiger, Star Ariel was at Kindly Field, having just returned from a trip to Kingston, Jamaica, when one of its sister aircraft, the BSAA Star Lion, suffered an engine failure on approach to Bermuda. The Star Lion landed fine, but Star Ariel was pressed into service to complete the Star Lion's route to Chile, with the first leg being a 6-hour flight to Kingston, Jamaica. Star Ariel took off at 8:40 a.m. with 7 crew and 13 passengers. At 9:37, Flight Commander Captain John McPhee radioed Bermuda that he was switching to the channel for this station in Kingston, Jamaica. And that was the last communication from Star Ariel. 2 aircraft were dispatched when the plane was overdue in Jamaica, but that was not all. A U.S. Naval task force was in the area, including 2 aircraft carriers and the battleship USS Missouri. They took to the search the next day. Jones wrote, "The naval force abandons its maneuvers. Aircraft carriers, cruisers, destroyers comb the waters with thousands of sharp eyes on watch. They learned no hint of the Ariel's fate." Again, there was an investigation of the Air Ministry. The conclusion was reminiscent of the report on the Star Tiger. Through lack of evidence, due to no wreckage having been found, the cause of the accident is unknown. An aviation blogger by the name of Good Captain Clack wrote, "Nothing was ever seen or observed that was positively ID'd as belonging to the lost Star Ariel. No wreckage, no debris, no bodies, no oil slicks. Nothing. Star Ariel had vanished as utterly and completely as her sister had the previous year." The loss of the Star Ariel had some stunning similarities to the loss a year earlier of Star Tiger. Both planes were apparently in good repair. Both crews known to be experienced and competent. There was no weather reported in the area that should have been a threat to the aircraft. Neither had radioed any sort of a distress call, which even had there been radio difficulties in Kingston or Bermuda, would have been heard by other stations. No signs of wreckage or debris from either aircraft was found. Both simply disappeared, without a trace. The airline withdrew the Tudors from service, and the losses were too much for BSAA. The airline didn't have enough aircraft without the Tudors, and the airline had gotten, unsurprisingly, a bad reputation. In March of 1949, BSAA was absorbed into BOAC. Noting the loss of these 2 planes and others, Jones wrote, "These and other modern mysteries have established a roll of about 135 persons who went forth confidently into the world they thought small. But it is the same big world that the ancients knew, into which men and their machines and ships can disappear without a trace." Jones's article is often considered to be the first to begin the discussion of what is today known as the Bermuda Triangle Mystery. The Star Tiger and the Star Ariel might not be nearly as well known as, for example, the missing naval aviators of the Navy's Flight 19 or the USS Cyclops, but their disappearance is truly a mystery. We don't know what happened to them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that anything supernatural or bizarre occurred. The report on the Star Tiger noted many possibilities about what might have happened to the plane, but they simply said that in the absence of further evidence, all we can do is list possibilities. There's plenty of explanations for what could have happened to these aircraft that simply could never be confirmed because the wreckage was never found. Shoot, the Star Tiger wouldn't even have been in the Bermuda Triangle because it hadn't reached Bermuda yet. And the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration notes that there's no evidence that mysterious disappearances occur with any more frequency in the Bermuda Triangle than they do in any other large, well-traveled area of the ocean. But the passengers and crew of the Star Tiger and the Star Ariel, wherever they may be, deserve to be remembered. What do you think happened to the airplanes? Let me know your theories in the comments. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo.